So your basic human figure is, as I said, 7.5 to 8 heads high. Generally speaking, a normal human being is about 7 heads. A heroic figure would be 8 to 9 heads, and a fashion model would be even more. It would be more 10 heads high probably. So let's start with the basic head shape, and I'm going to drop a line down, and I'm going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and some change. Shoulders halfway, half a head down. Pelvis is at the base of the 4th head. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half. So I tend to mark those things out first. Shoulders, hips, triangle for the pelvis, belly button, nipples will be here. Knees will be either at or above the 6 head mark, depending on if it's a 7.5 or 8 head high figure. Feet at the very bottom. For this will be do the man first because they're standard. The standard model, not the one with all the extras, tends to be 2 heads wide at the shoulders. So you would take a head and you would measure 2 heads wide at the outside of the shoulders, about 1.5 heads wide at the hips. The rib cage, it's a good idea to think of the shape of the bone structure. The sternum comes down halfway. It's half the height of the whole rib cage. The ribs actually flare out a little bit like this, but I do this kind of weird shape for my hips, my rib cage. Hip bones, the pelvis has a bowl shape to it because all of our guts have to be supported in the basket of the pelvis. It comes to the front, and a bone is open in the back where there's the tailbone and the sternum, at the tailbone and the sacrum and the base of the spine. Slight gap between the hips and the ribs. There's actually less than you think. If you feel your own base of your own ribs and the top of your own hip bone, you're probably going to get like maybe 1 to 3 inches at the most. Okay, so the shoulders for men, since their shoulders are wider than their hips, here's the belly button, here's the elbows. It falls right at the belly button line. There's the nipple line, so we can see this will be the chest. Here's the clavicles. Here's the neck. Here's the head. Arms hang straight on a man. Down. Yes, that is the cat having a bad time. And from the hip bones, the joint of the hip is actually lower than the hip bone, so it's below that. And the femurs angle in and square up at the knee. And then you have the shin bone, ankles, foot. So there's your basic. So it seems a little short. I think I would have liked to have that up a little higher. So I'm going to go ahead and raise that pelvis a little bit. The tips of the fingers tend to fall at the mid-thigh. The wrists tend to line up with the hip joints, like so. Now for a female, we'll have the same basic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5. Hips, shoulders. The shoulders tend to be 1.5 heads wide, and the hips tend to be 2 heads wide. So here's one major difference in the female skeleton versus the male skeleton. The clavicles curve a bit more, which brings the shoulders a bit narrower. And men's clavicles curve, but they tend to be straighter. Rib cage, and of course the pelvis is wider for reasons we all know. And because the pelvis is wider than the shoulders, the arms actually hang with a slight angle. Now this is just a generalized, I can't see my chat window, I'm sorry. My mic is not cooperating with me. Am I cutting out? Anybody else having that problem? There's the elbows, shoulders. They tend to angle out a little bit to clear the hips. The femurs, which have a slight angle, and they go out at the head of the femur. The femur is shaped like a ball with a little neck on it, and then the long part of the bone, and then two rounded parts where it rotates against the top of the shin bone, and the patella is in the middle. And then there's another bone on the outside. So these two bones on the outside make the ankles. The shin bone makes the inside ankle, and the fibula makes the outside ankle. Okay. So there's your basic proportions. He's still a little squat. I would like to have added a half a head to him. What else? Let's do one from the side here. I always like to add those, the basic shapes of the muscles is going to be more delicate on the female, of course, unless you're doing bodybuilders. But we still get this really nice rhythm of the thighs as the muscles wrap around those bones and create those bulges and come in at the joints and then bulge out again in between and then come in again at the joints. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. From the side, we have the head tends to be like this egg shape, and you can drop the faceplate off the front like so. Tuck the chin in about halfway, and that's where your ear is going to be. This is pretty much universal as well. So believe it or not, when you're looking at the head from the front, there's the eyes are always going to be halfway between the crown and the chin. Here are the eyes, and then the nose is halfway between the eyes and the chin, and the mouth is a third of the way between the nose and the chin. The neck actually starts up here behind the jawbone. So the neck doesn't start here, but actually starts here where the ears are. And you can't see that because it's overlapped by the bottom of the chin. So keep that in mind when you're developing your figure, that you won't see the whole neck. Some people have much longer necks and they also have smaller chins, but generally speaking, the spine starts up here behind the jawbone underneath the ear, balancing this huge 6-pound or so cannonball on the top of this column. The cervical spine, 7 vertebrae, and then there's a very prominent bulge on the bone. You can all feel it go on the back of your neck and feel that one bone. That's the 7th cervical vertebrae. That's the end of the neck. Then you have the 12 thoracic vertebrae, which are the ones connected to the ribs, 12 ribs, 12 sets of ribs. Sternum going halfway down, and then the rest of these ribs below the sternum all connect to each other, and then the ribs above the sternum connect straight to the sternum. We have a reverse curve, so it's going in and then out and then in again. Here at the lumbar, there's only 5 vertebrae in the lumbar, and they're very thick, big, heavy lumbar vertebrae. Then you get the sacrum and the tailbone, or the coccyx, which are basically fused up vertebrae. And the pelvis on either side, which goes around like sort of like this, and then there's the socket for the hip, and there's a thing called an ischium, which is a loop that's on the inside. There's 2 loops that come here from the front to the back. Okay. The shoulders are going to end up being here. The scapulas float on the back here. They're free floating. They're not attached to anything except this shoulder. They create the shoulder joint, the scapula on one side, and the clavicles or the collarbones on the other side. The collarbones join up to the sternum. So the only thing that's attaching your arms to your body are 2 little moderately flexible joints at the top of the sternum. So arm bones to the muscle, to the belly button, and then lower arms, and then wrist at the hip joint, and then hands. So it goes like that. And then the thigh bone actually curves, and I'm off the page because I didn't do the proportions correctly. It always depends on the pose, but the proportions are still pretty incontrovertible. Oh, another great proportional thing to keep in mind is that you stretch the arms out from completely across from side to side. It's going to be the same fingertip to fingertip as it is toe, head to toe. All right. Now, let's